How do you communicate with them?
The main source of communication for them is telepathic. They do not speak. I know of no extraterrestrials that speak. There may be some out there. I've never seen or experienced any.
No, we don't communicate, obviously, telepathically on this plane. Why do you think you can communicate with them telepathically in another, let's say, area?
That's a good question. It's medical fact or science fact that we use only, what, a very small percentage of our brains. I think that there are muscles in our minds that lie dormant or that are atrophied. And I think that these muscles can be activated. So I think once you get around an extraterrestrial's mind and they radiate or communicate telepathically, I think it begins to exercise the muscles that we have naturally that lie dormant. It wakes them up.
Tell us more about the communication with symbols. Are there holographic images involved?
They create holograms or images that literally hang in the air. For lack of a better explanation, I call it a hologram.
For example?
Sometimes before an abduction, not always, I would get the courtesy of a symbol just before being pulled. I like to call it pulled, abducted, to let me know what kind of abduction it would be. An example, a hologram of an owl would appear. When I would see something like that, that would tell me it's time for school. That's what would happen on that abduction. Some cases, a hologram of a medical instrument. Something like a forceps would appear, and that would tell me this abduction would include medical procedures or semen extraction.
In the early years, Jim usually found himself sitting at a table in an almost completely paralyzed state. In front of him was a screen in which he was forced to learn an alphabet, a number system, and symbols. Over and over again, he converted our letters and numbers to what he thought was their letters and numbers.
As time has gone on, I don't believe that now to be their alphabet per se. I think it was a common ground form of communication. Nothing about this, any of this, is conventional. The symbols, literally like the holograms, hang in the air. Interesting about the symbols, though, if I may explain. I had one experience where I read a story in regular language that I understand, our language, and I would say it was probably about 20 pages long. They could take the same story and put it in their alphabet that I was explaining earlier, which would only take perhaps a half a page. And then they could condense that half a page to a 50-cent coin piece like symbol, and all you have to do is look at it and understand.
The alien language must be done in what we would consider to be three-dimensional space, and that one of the problems of the communication between our species and this other species is that we still are relying on a two-dimensional kind of communication and a verbal stream of words, whereas this other intelligence relies on a three-dimensional, technologically projected symbol communication that is combined with telepathy.
Obviously, their language is more condensed than ours and more effective as well.
They have minds that think 10 to 100 times faster than ours do. They have to slow themselves way down to communicate telepathically. In fact, the more I got abducted, the less they wanted me to rely on telepathic communication and more on the symbolic communication.
You described worker beings in your book.
Right.
What do you mean by worker beings compared to aliens? Is there a chain of command here?
Well, I think it's probably the biggest reasons that extraterrestrials have been involved with humans hundreds, if not thousands of years. I think that they take or extract the raw material that they need in order to create just that, worker beings. I think these are the same beings that most abductees describe. They're the small, atrophied, large head, large teardropped eyes looking creatures. Those are the workers. And then there are the aliens that I call the true aliens, at least in the species that I'm familiar with. They're a little bit taller, and they seem to have a run of things. So yeah, there's workers and there's supervisors, for lack of a better definition.
Now, workers, is this a subspecies? Is it a created species?
Yes, it's created, purely.
Obviously, one of the big questions that we have is why are these encounters occurring from the alien point of view? And my own feeling is it's very difficult to think like an alien. We don't know the answer to that question. We can only make educated guesses. It does seem that some of the so-called aliens are conducting genetic experiments. It does seem as if human women especially are being impregnated, but human men are also being taken, abducted, and sperm samples are taken from these men.
The genetic experimentation, the creation of a kind of hybrid mix of them and us, that's the really central goal that they're really centrally involved with. That's why they're here, really. But along with that is the idea that they're interested in studying human emotions, human sexuality, human feelings of love for one another, especially feelings of maternal and paternal love for our children. All of the things that are sort of basically human, emotionally.
Besides semen and ova extraction, what else are they interested in?
Emotions and our ability to reproduce.
Do they have emotions?
No.
None at all.
If they do, it's a higher form, or it's a form that I don't understand. The best way I could describe that would be if I was a child, an infant, and I wanted ice cream. Although my father or my mother knew it would be time for a nutritious meal, I would scream and yell like a baby that I would be, that I want ice cream, and I would think mom and dad have no feelings and no emotions because they want me to eat vegetables. So perhaps, if you can see where I'm going with this analogy, as humans, our emotions relative to theirs, it's almost the same thing. But I'm not saying they all don't have emotions. I'm saying the ones that I've been dealing with, or have been dealing with me, I should say, in particular, seem very emotionless. There are other races that seem to have emotions, and those are the scaled ones. I think they're commonly referred to as reptilians.
In a sense, it seems like they're almost farming us.
In fact, I think you couldn't put it in a better way. I think that they have been using raw materials from human beings to make these worker beings. Semen from men, genetic material, ova or eggs from women, and I think they've been doing this to human beings in secret, maybe thousands of years.
Besides raw materials for, let's say, worker beings, what other resources do they need from us, or do they steal from us in a sense?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily stealing. It's almost something like what we would do with cattle. Thank God they don't eat us. We do take care of a cow's medical need. We make sure that they have a nice pasture to graze on and so forth. Unfortunately, at the end, they end up at your grocer's freezer. As far as humans are concerned, they've been extracting these raw materials for years and years and years. But I said one reason is they make these worker bees. Another reason I feel almost certain of is for their own longevity. In other words, they have a technology that can extract tissue intact from a human, maybe 1/1000th in size. To give you an example, let's say that field I told you they created, they can actually take 1/1000th of the tissue in an elbow, and you'd wake up in the morning and feel like maybe your elbow's sore. And they can take it and they can overlay it on themselves if the genetic material matches up naturally, and it would regenerate whatever ailment they may have in the elbow. I think that they farm humans in that way.
So it's more than a coincidence that we have somewhat similar body parts.
I think so. And I think there's a universal rule, which is higher intelligence takes advantage of and uses lower intelligence, not unlike what we do to cattle.
If, as the evidence shows, the aliens are interested in this kind of ongoing genetic, shall we say, tampering or whatever, at least the attempt apparently to connect their stock with our stock, that would explain why they seem to follow a particular bloodline in a particular family. And so if a parent or parents have been abducted, there is sadly likelihood that offspring will be abducted too, not necessarily all of them. And perhaps another generation